Welcome back to If You're Fat, Lose Weight. And we are honored to be joined by one of the great punters that truly doesn't get his recognition. An author, a gamer, a musician, an outspoken advocate of gay rights and marriage before it became the societal norm. The man whose fifth punt on a freezing December night in 2010 allowed Devin Hester to break the record for the most punts / kickoff touchdown returns in NFL history. A man who got kicked off Twitter for imitating Elon Musk, who is proving to be the biggest snowflake of all alleged centrists, the great Chris Kluwe. Welcome, my man. Great to have you.
That might be the most involved introduction I have ever heard.
Thank you. I
appreciate it.
That's what we do here. We want to give our guests the proper due. We want to make them smile. We want to make them feel comfortable. And you know what we're doing here on this podcast is I'm just having conversations with interesting people. We have spoken 0 times on the phone. We've spoken by text for 2 sentences. You agreed to come on, and I'm very, very happy you did. So first, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up. I think it'll inform a lot of our conversation that follows.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Southern California. I was born actually in Philadelphia, but then my parents moved back to California when I was like 1 month old. So pretty much for all intents and purposes, I am a Southern California kid. And I grew up in Seal Beach, went to local high school, Los Alamitos, then ended up going to UCLA to play college football, and ended up in Minnesota, which was slightly different.
Yeah, I bet. All right. So when you were, did you play football only, or were you a multi-sport athlete growing up?
So it's funny, actually growing up, I only played soccer and baseball. I didn't play football growing up.
Oh, interesting.
And never really had any intention of playing football. And then my freshman year of high school, I needed a fall sport. And so I was like, well, I can kick a soccer ball really far. Let's see if I can kick a football really far. And it worked out pretty well for me.
Wow. That's wild. So you never kicked a football until a freshman year of high school.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So truth be told, okay, I have 3 kids. 2 of them are boys. They're not athletically inclined. They're 5 and 3. I mean, it's still early, but I'm Jewish. I'm 6'2". I coached basketball in my former life. The dream died of playing in the NBA, like my junior year of high school. I always thought the best thing to do if you want to be a pro athlete would to try and be a punter.
It's punters, kickers, long snappers, not quite so much because you get a lot of punishment up on the line. Right. But it's actually, honestly, the best dream position is backup quarterback because you get paid a ton and you don't do anything.
What happens? You have to go and play. That's not
don't play. Just don't play for the 49ers. You'll be fine.
Okay. All right. So you're in high school. And you go out and you start kicking the ball, looking for a sport to play in the fall season. And what happens? You're just great and it's an easy fit for you? You're a punter and a kicker, or how does it go?
Yeah, so I can put a lot of power on the ball, but there's different techniques in terms of kicking a football versus kicking a soccer ball, because obviously a soccer ball's round. You can get away with a lot more, whereas a football, you have to hit a very specific sweet spot on the ball. But for me, really, the reason I really stuck with it was the training camp I went to. It was called the Kicking Game run by Paul and John Stonehouse. I was there as a freshman, just kind of learning and like watching everything that was going on. And when I hit the ball clean, like I was already hitting it as well as the college punters that were there. They had guys from they had one guy from Cal, then a couple guys who were in community colleges. And I was like, if I'm hitting it that well now, I'm like, yeah, sure, it's erratic right now because I don't have the technique down. But like, if I can get this consistent, then I think I've got a pretty good chance, at least at playing in college. And then as I improved, as I got to my junior and senior year, John, he had actually bounced around the league for a couple of years, kind of on some training squads and practice squads. And he was like, if you work at this, like you have a chance to make it in the NFL. And I was like, well, that sounds like a pretty sweet job. I think I am going to work at this.
Right. That's amazing. Okay. So in high school, you were just a punter, or you were also the field goal kicker. How does that work?
Yeah, I did both. So high school, generally you do most guys will do both because you can use that 2-inch block to kick off the ground for field goals. So you can approach all three motions very similar to a punting motion. You don't really have to scoop under the ball that much. Where you start seeing guys specialize is in college, because once you get to college, you have to kick it off the ground. You can't use the block anymore. And then kicking becomes a little bit more of a horizontal swiveling motion. You don't want a ton of horizontal swiveling because it messes with your aim, but it uses your hips a little bit more. And then punting stays straight on. And you really don't want those two motions to mix, because if you swivel your hips when you punt, your accuracy goes way down and your chance of hitting a good ball goes way down. If you kick straight on a field goal, you might hit your long snapper in the back of the helmet, which I may or may not have done.
Okay. So you got a scholarship to UCLA, is that right?
Yeah. I got a scholarship my senior year in high school.
Okay. And could you have gone multiple places or
I had offers from all over the place. Like it was I had a bunch of like East Coast schools, because I also had pretty good grades. I was a pretty good student. So so like Harvard offered me, Dartmouth offered me. I can't remember if Purdue did or not.
Wow.
A couple of the academy schools. I think it was the Air Force Academy. And then I had SC tried to recruit me away from UCLA. Washington recruited me. Washington State recruited me. So yeah, it was basically like my senior year. It was like I could pick and choose. I was very fortunate that I could choose where I got to go. And for me, UCLA was great because it was close enough to where if I wanted to come back home, I could, but it was far enough away to where it would be tough for my parents to bug me. So it was, and you're still in Southern California, so it's tough to beat.
Yeah, great. I wish I was there now. Okay, that's interesting. So then when you got to college, were you like, I'm a punter or I'm a field goal kicker, or they kind of dictated?
Yeah, so it was. Yeah, I was mainly a punter. They wanted me to try field goals my freshman year, just to see if I could do it, but I wasn't really having any success hitting the ball off the ground very well. So they're like, yeah, just stick with punting. Like that's what you're going to be. And it was when I was in college. I had to wait 3 years in order to actually play, because the guy in front of me, Nate Fixie, he was a good guy. He was the all Pac-10 first team punter, when I got there. And so it's kind of like, all right, the older guy's there, he does the job, right? Like, even though I would outkick him in practice, it's like, okay, it's not enough of a difference to make a difference. And I mean, and to be fair, like I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'll put in the time. Like it allows me to keep working on refining my techniques. And, all I need is a season or two, like, cause if go out and show what I can do, then I think I have a chance. And yeah, that's what ended up happening.
Okay. I apologize. I'm like fascinated by like this whole punting thing. So like, what do you do? Like I watch football practice. I see them. Offense plays against the defense. You work on your tackling. You work on your routes, etc. What are punters and kickers doing during practice? I assume you're not kicking for 3 hours. So what are you doing?
Yeah. So what you're doing is you're actually really working on refining your technique. And because the coaches expect you to be perfect, right? Like, and you're never going to achieve perfection, but your goal is to get like 99.9%, where like almost every single time you go out there that you're going to do what they need you to do. And the thing with punting and kicking is it's funny because a lot of people think, oh, I could do that, right? I'll just get off my couch. I can kick a ball, right? How hard can it be? But the problem, the problem is it actually, there is a lot of technique that goes into it, and you're doing this motion very, very quickly. So you have to be spot on. It's like a golf swing, right? Like there's a lot of like semi-decent golfers. There aren't a lot of pro golfers. And so like really that's the difference, is just working to get that motion so consistent every time, because it's also a little bit different from the other positions in that you're not really dependent on going against another person. Right. It's essentially it's you versus the ball instead of you versus the person across from you. So it's not as much adaptability. It's more, okay, get the motion down and then execute it when the time comes.
Right. Okay. So the team is doing what they're doing, and you're kind of like off the side or like on the other side of the field, and you're just working on your technique. And they have drills for you, and you're kicking, and you're.
So you have your own drills, because my entire career from high school all the way up through the NFL, I never had a single special teams coach that actually understood the fundamentals of punting and kicking. Like, if you asked them to explain how to kick football, they would not be able to tell you. And so generally the guys who make it, they're taught by someone who does know how to do that, usually a former punter or kicker, and then they implement those same drills, or, they kind of adjust them based on what works best for them. And it's really strange to explain, because like, if you were to tell a football fan, like, hey, here's our quarterback's coach, but he doesn't know how to throw a football. Like, right. They just be like, why does this guy have this job?
Right. Exactly. That's why it's so fascinating to me. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. But special teams, it's like, you don't have to know how to kick or punt a football. Just specialists, go do your thing.
Right. Crazy. Okay. So today in the NFL, there's, offensive line coach, a tight ends coach, a wide receivers coach, a safeties coach, blah, blah, blah. There's a special teams coach. Do those special team coaches in the NFL today know the techniques and things that you should be working on? Are they helping with that, or is it still similar in your mind?
I mean, obviously, I retired in 2013, so that's 10 years ago. Right. I would hope it's gotten better, but I severely doubt it has. Because the other issue with the special teams coach position in the NFL is that it's really rare to get guys who are like lifetime special teams coaches, right? Like, it's generally the 95% of the coaches who are special teams coaches. For them, it's just another step on the rungs, as you're trying to get up to the head coaching job. So like, it's an important step, and they take it seriously. Like, they want to succeed, but it's at the end of the day for them, it's about schemes, it's about personnel, it's not about the punting and kicking technique, because it is a very esoteric technique. Like, you don't naturally use a punting or kicking motion in your everyday life. Like, you don't need to know that. So yeah, it's actually something I'm working on. I'm working on a book right now, like on writing down actually like how to teach all this stuff. Cause I also help coach freshman football at the local high school. And after 4 years of watching freshman football at the local level, like, no one knows how to teach kicking and punting. I'm like, I should really help these people out, because it would make
it seems like you could have a nice niche. Yeah, it seems like you could develop a nice niche. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so my hope is that like I can write this book well enough to where people will actually be entertained reading it and learn how to punt and kick, so they can teach other people how to punt and kick.
All right, that's good. I think that's a good mission. So as far as like, you're at practice, you're in the locker rooms, what's your relationship like with your teammates? Obviously it's, personality driven, but you're not like in the trenches with them, and so you're kind of, doing your thing, they're doing their thing. And I read that you you were reading sci-fi books on the sideline during your high school games.
Yeah, my high school coach actually had to tell me to stop reading on the sidelines, because I was like, this is boring. Like, I'm only out there on fourth down. I know when fourth down is. Like, I don't care about the other three downs. So yeah, it was. I may also be a huge nerd, so that's it was a way for me to keep myself entertained. But
so are you? You're just on the. Go ahead. Yeah, go. Yeah.
I was going to say, as far as getting along with your teammates, it's it really depends on who you are as a person and kind of your interpersonal relationship skills. But the other thing is, as you move up in levels, as you go from high school to college to the pros, it actually becomes easier to get along with your teammates, because at the high school level, everyone's like, oh, it's just the kicker, and you also have the whole like teenage angst stuff to work with. So that whole thing's a hot mess. You get to college and it's slightly less teenage angst, but it's also still kind of like, oh yeah, you're a kicker, like, okay, yeah, you're doing good. But then once you get to the NFL, like, everyone is there for a reason. Like, they're there to do a job. Like, you're getting paid to do this. It's okay. If you do your job, like, it allows me to do my job. We'll get along great. If you can't do your job, doesn't matter what position you play. Like, guys are going to be like, why aren't you doing your job? Right. So yeah, that was kind of pleasant to see, where it was like, yeah, if you approach it professionally and you conduct yourself appropriately, guys are like, yeah, go do your job.
Right. Okay. So another thing I read was, when you played for the Minnesota Vikings, they traded for Donovan McNabb. Is that right? Or did they? Yes. Yeah, they traded for Donovan McNabb, and you had his jersey. And
number 5.
You had his jersey number 5. So you guys had a negotiation. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah. This story always comes up. And it was pretty funny because, normally when guys sell their jersey numbers, right, like it's either like a new car or, you get like 20 grand or whatever it happens to be. And I was like, like he's had this number his entire life. Like, I really don't care what number I wear. It's just a number. So, why not make it something entertaining? So I was like, all right, I'll give you the number, but you have to mention my band, Tripping It Chris, 5 times, 5 separate times, but he just threw it all in one press conference. So I was like, yeah, that's fine. Whatever. Donate 5 grand to a charity that I was involved with, which he did, and then he had to give me an ice cream cone. and it's the ice cream cone bit that always like people ask about, because for the longest time he never gave me the ice cream cone. And I'm just like, seriously, we have a cafeteria upstairs. Just go grab an ice cream cone.
You would think it would have been easy for him to
right? Like that was the easiest part.
Right.
But yeah, so eventually he got me the ice cream cone. I think it was like 4 or 5 years later. He was a host on like a sports show at Fox or something like that, and I was in for an interview. I'm like, Donovan, please, people keep asking me, has he given you the ice cream cone yet? Like, can you just get an assistant to grab me like a drumstick or something so I can say yes?
That's great.
And so yeah, he laughed and got it. So yeah, now I can say yes, I did get the ice cream cone.
That's great. Okay, so are you still a football fan? Obviously, you're coaching. Did you watch the Super Bowl? You watch the playoffs? Are you like a big football fan still, or not so much?
I'm not a huge football fan. I did watch the Super Bowl, and generally I'll tune into the playoffs. It's funny, like growing up, I was never really a sports fan. Like I really enjoy playing sports, but when it comes to watching them, I'm just kind of like, I could be playing video games right now.
Right.
so
Which
yeah,
is another one
like,
of your things. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, that being said, like I have come to enjoy watching sports a bit more, just because it's like, okay, yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on there. But for the most part, like if it's up to me, I'm not going to voluntarily put a sports game on, but it's not the end of the world if it's on. It's like, okay, I can still be entertained, watching this and have some insight into it.
Right. So the reason why I ask is because we were recording this a Wednesday after the Super Bowl, and the punter,
the softest holding penalty ever.
Well, the softest. I mean, yeah, that was very bad. But that actually brings me to my point, right? So we talked about this on this show that's running tomorrow or this is the Thursday after the Super Bowl. Sorry. So we're running something on Friday, our Super Bowl recap, whatever. And we talked about the hold that shouldn't be called, whatever. That's what we spent 20 minutes on, right? But nobody mentions the punt by the Eagles punter when they were down 1 point, and he kicks this line drive punt.
It's a really bad punt.
Yeah, really a bad punt, which happens. Yeah. But this is my point about my children, right? It's like, what is the best thing to do in pro sports where you make a nice living? You're kind of out of harm's way. Although I do see punters, they like to go mix it up on the punt coverage, and I want to ask you about that too. But so you said you watched the playoffs. I don't know if you saw the Cowboys kicker, the field goal kicker, who's just missing 30-yard kicks. He missed like 5 extra points in a row, and it just becomes such a mental thing, and it's all over the news. They're talking about it all week, and yet this punter, he kicks a terrible punt. It's actually a really impactful play in the Super Bowl. People are it's like swept under the rug. I think it's a great life. So I don't know. That's what I got to work on my kids. That's my point. Yeah.
Right. So the thing with the punt is, it was a bad punt in terms of hang time. Like he didn't give his guys quite enough time to get down there. The location was good because you could tell, he's trying to put it over by the sideline, and he ended up doing that. The problem was the coverage team, they over pursued to that side and they lost contain because the guy cut it back to, it would have been the Eagles left. And so as you watch the replay, there's like 7 guys there, and they're all either head up or on the right side of the guy, and like whoever was supposed to have contained got blocked out, and now it's just a free run to the sideline and turn the corner. So I mean, the thing with that is that half of it's on the punter, half of it's on lane discipline, right? Like you have to stay in your lane so that way you can create that net and squeeze the guy down so he can't pop out.
Well, they still should have tackled him. They still should have tackled him.
Yeah, they still should have tackled
him. They were right there. They had like 3 guys there. So you can't, like, to your point, you can't only blame the punter, but the punt was like a line drive and directionally correct. Right.
Yeah, it was a failure on multiple levels. And I've had that happen too, where it's just like, okay, I hit the ball where it's supposed to go, but if you don't put enough hang time on it and the returner gets, enough space to move in, now you make it a lot harder for your guys to keep their lanes because the returner can try and set them up, to go somewhere, and then move in the opposite direction. Hester was really good at that. Like he was phenomenal at, juking guys out, faking them out. But it was like that one was kind of like a whole special teams breakdown. It wasn't like it was just, a 20-yard punt off the side of his foot, like straight out of bounds. Because although they might have wanted that instead.
They might have preferred that for sure. Right? For sure. Then they running it all the way down to the 4. Yeah.
Yeah. But what's funny so you mentioned the Cowboys kicker. So I know exactly what's wrong with his motion. Like I could tell from the first kick is, and that's why I say it's so important to know the actual fundamentals of putting and kicking, because if they had someone on the sideline, like who understood what they were seeing, they would have been able to correct his motion, like during that process of that game. And the problem is that when you watch him kick, the first step he takes is really short, which means his second step is he's coming into the ball is really long. So it's lunging. He's putting his hips off balance. So he missed that first one right because he lunged the ball's going to go where your hips are pointing when you make contact. So his hips are pointing to the right. When he makes contact, he pushes it right. Next one, same thing. Lunges, same steps, short first step, long second step, hips are pointing to the right, pushes it. Third one, he tries to overcorrect by swinging his hips. And so he whips across. Now his hips are pointing to the left. When he makes contact, hooks it left. So again, all he has to do to fix that is lengthen his first step, shorten up his second step so they're more even. That'll keep his hips straight. Now the ball goes straight down the middle.
See, if only they knew to hire you. You probably not so expensive,
Yeah, I know. It's like, but again, like if you don't know those like tiny little fundamentals, then you'd look at it and be like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? Like, why can't he kick it? And your first thought wouldn't be, oh, it's your first step. Your thought's going to be, oh, well, are you swinging too hard? Like, are you looking up? Are you aiming wrong? But like knowing how important the steps are, it's like, it's like, that's what he's got to fix. Like, it's your steps.
Right. It's funny. You work in pro sports. You played pro sports. Like, people as fans are surprised that there is 120 people on the sideline and nobody can go and tell him in real time what you just said. And so there's probably more to, there's probably some mental part of it as well as to him overcorrecting and blah, blah, blah.
Oh,
he probably knows it. He's a pro. He's been doing it. But there isn't anybody there. And this happens in not only kicking. This happens in all sports, in all aspects. In the NBA, they have 10 assistant coaches now that are assigned to do any number of things. But the amount of stuff that is basic, that is missed, it's fascinating to me. And I don't think as a fan, people really understand that happens all the time.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating to me too, because we're talking about literally a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Like, and this changes the outcome of games. Like you win or lose games
and jobs and livelihoods, and etc.
Right. Yeah. Due in part to how your special teams unit performs. But you get a pass with not knowing anything because that's been the way it's been for so long.
That's been the way it's been. Yeah. Okay. Well, so did you get drafted or did you just get signed?
I got signed. I was an undrafted free agent. I was fortunate though. My agent was in contact with the Seahawks during the draft process and all the way through it. And basically, they were telling him they were either going to draft me like late in the 7th round or pick me up immediately as an undrafted free agent if I didn't get grabbed by anyone else. And sure enough, like as soon as the draft was over, they're like, "Hey, do you want to come to camp as an undrafted free agent?" And I was like, "Yes," because I'd also had an offer to go to Green Bay, asked me to come in, and the 49ers asked me to come in. But in both of those teams, they already had an established punter, so basically, I would have just been a camp leg. Seattle was like a legit; it was a competition. Like they didn't. The guy they had, Donnie Jones, actually ended up playing for the Eagles for when they won the Super Bowl 4 or 5 years ago. He had a pretty shaky previous year. So they were bringing him back. They brought in a veteran, Leo Aragus, who had punted for the Raiders for a while. And then they brought me in. So it was essentially a 3-way competition. And, whoever won it would win it. And so to me, I felt
that
like
was good agenting. That was good agenting.
Yes. Very good agenting because like it actually put me in a position to succeed because that's the other issue with being a punter or kicker is there are only 32 positions. Like teams don't carry backups. You got to earn one of those 32 positions. And generally it's a pretty long-lived career. So each year there may be only 1 or 2 openings that are like legit openings, to take a job. Like some years there aren't any openings. I mean, freaking Vinatieri, like one of the best kickers of all time. He played in I think it was like the CFL or NFL Europe for his first 2 years because just he couldn't get into the league. And then once he got into the league, he stayed forever. But it's just as much luck as it is skill.
That's wild. Okay. And then like how much how much in your day did punters make a year range? And then how much do they make now for the uninformed?
So let's see. So when I went in, rookie minimum, which is what I made my rookie year, I think it was like 275,000, 280,000, which again, like, don't get me wrong, that's a shit ton of money. Like that's, like, that's amazing. Right. You come out of college and make that, that's very fortunate. Sure. Guys who were established, I think at that time, the highest would have been probably about 3.5 to 4 million a year. Nowadays, I think the upper range is probably around 5, maybe 5, maybe 6. I don't know the exact numbers, but that's what I would assume. Lower, I think rookie minimum now though is a lot higher. I want to say it's closer to like 600 or 700,000.
Yeah, definitely has gone up. What a life, huh? I mean, God, I'm really got to work on my kids. We're gonna get them to the Chris Kluwe school of punting.
I'll teach them.
You start it. Yeah.
Yep. I'm more than happy to teach punting.
Thank you. All right. So while you were in the NFL, well, first of all, did you hurt your knee? Is that something that happened as well?
Yes.
And so, you didn't get it fixed, or you did? So tell us that.
So my rookie year. So preseason, I was with the Seahawks, and then the Vikings claimed me off waivers going into week 1 because the Seahawks were going to put me on practice squad. Vikings were like, hey, we're going to give this kid a shot because I'd punted pretty well in the preseason, and we'd played the Vikings game 4. So they had actually seen me punt.
They saw you, right.
Yeah, and the guys they had weren't having a very good preseason. I think it was Darren Bennett and Travis Dorsch. So essentially they're like, all right, we're going to bring this kid in. If he sucks, we'll just bring back Bennett. And then we don't have to guarantee a salary because he wasn't on the roster week 1. So I'm with the Vikings, played really well. I got special teams player of the month, my first month. So that would have been September or whatever it is. I think I was in the top 3 in terms of like gross and net yardage. And then I want to say it was either week 11 or week 12. We were playing at Detroit. And my long snapper he snapped a high ball in, I think it was the second quarter. So I jump up, knock the ball down, roll out to my right, to try to escape any pressure. And I went to kick it. And so I kicked it, came down on my right leg and felt it kind of buckle to the side. And so I was like, okay, something happened with my knee, but there wasn't any pain. Like I just felt it shift, and then it was starting to swell up a bit. So I got on the exercise bike to try and keep it loose. But in high school, I had torn my ACL in my left knee, and so when I did that, I also tore part of the cartilage, and it hurt. Like it hurt bad. So when I injured my right knee, I was just like, oh well, okay, something's wrong with my knee, but I think I can get through the game. Now in the later in the second quarter, dude punted again. Dude came screaming off the edge and dove right into my plant foot as I was fully extended. And I legit thought I broke my ankle because he landed full body weight on it. Luckily, it was just a really bad low ankle sprain. So they had to cart me off. Couldn't finish out the game. Paul Edinger was our kicker. He finished off the game. So get back to Minnesota the next day, and they're like, okay, we need to bring you in, get MRI, get x-rays on your ankle, see what's going on. I'm like, okay, while I'm here, can you take a look at my knee too? Cause I feel like I did something. So they MRI my knee, come back, and the doctor's like, your knee is damaged. I'm just, okay, well, I guess, they would tell me if it was bad. So I'm like, all right. So sat out the next game because I still couldn't put any weight on my left foot. But then finished out the last 3 games of the season. And I knew there was something wrong with my knee because I couldn't really pop through as much as I normally could. And I had to use my hips a lot more to generate power instead of using actual, snapping through with your knee. But I'm just like, I'm a rookie in the NFL. I've got to play. If you don't play, undrafted free agent, they're going to find someone else. So finish out the season. The next day after our last game, during our exit physicals, they're like, yeah, you have a torn ACL. You should probably get that fixed. I'm just excuse me?
Wow.
That should have been the very first thing you told me when you got the MRI back. And so, needless to say, that was the training staff that was part of the old regime. This was back when Red McCombs had just sold the team to the Wolves. Jesus. And so that training staff was no longer the training staff the next year. They cleaned house entirely because it wasn't just me. We also had Weldy Moore, one of our running backs. They had him go out there. He was playing with a broken arm in a soft cast. And he's out there returning kicks and playing running back with a broken arm in a soft cast.
This was, wow. That was 20 years ago. So think of how far we've come in 20 years. which is a good thing.
Yeah, no, it's a very good thing. Like it's because again, like you run the risk of like injuring yourself for life doing that. And I mean, had I known my ACL was torn, I would have been like, yes, I'm getting surgery on this immediately.
Of course.
Like I've had this injury before. I know I can come back from it, but like the last thing you want to do is cause further damage to your knee because you're out there freaking like making it do stuff you're not supposed to do. So yeah,
it's
that
amazing
was a very,
that you kept punting. It's amazing that you punted through that though too.
Well, I mean, so the thing is like, I know people like to give punters and kickers crap, you know, like, oh, you know, like all these other guys are doing the, you know, the tough stuff and everything. But it's like, in my mindset, it's always been like, yeah, the job I do is different from everyone else, but like that doesn't mean I can't like be tough out there. Like that doesn't mean I'm not going to give you everything I have. And like, yeah, this is the NFL. Like it's you're going to get injured, you're going to play hurt, and you know what? It applies to every position.
Well, yeah, I mean it's like Brock Purdy throwing through his, you know, torn elbow. Yeah, I mean, you just at some point, you know, it becomes diminishing returns. But anyways, okay. All right. So, you know, I think you're an interesting guy. Obviously, we just nerded out on punting, which I don't know if anybody besides the two of us is so
drive your numbers way up.
But I'm really fascinated by it. I could go another hour on it. But what's really interesting to you is you were an outspoken gay rights, gay marriage activist. I mean, not even activist per se, but you were outspoken about being pro gay rights and gay marriage as a heterosexual man. You know, in before Obama came out for being pro gay marriage. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how it affected your career, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah. So it was, this was back in 2012, early 2012. There was going to be a ballot initiative in Minnesota to ban same-sex marriage. And the group behind it, like very, very similar amendments had been passed in other states. I think California did it. It was like Prop 8 or something like that. It was like, you know, really, really controversial at the time. And so this group, Minnesotans for Marriage Equality, contacted me through Twitter because they'd seen my Twitter feed, and they're just like, hey, you seem, you know, like a decent person who would want to speak out against this. Like, are you interested in helping us defeat this amendment? And I was like, yeah, I think I am. Like, I don't think enshrining bigotry into a state's constitution is really a good use of our time. And so, I told him, yeah, let me just clear it with the team first. Like, you know, make sure this is something that's okay. And so went and talked to the team's legal department, and they're like, yeah, as long as you make it clear, you know, you're acting as Chris Kluwe, like private citizen, not speaking for the Vikings. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm not going to say this is the Vikings tell you, you know, to oppose this. Just be like, yeah, no, it's just me. Like this is during my free time. Like, yeah, I'll go, you know, help try and defeat this. So, did a couple appearances, you know, just talking to people, like saying, hey, like this is not okay. Like this is discrimination. Like we shouldn't be having this in the state constitution. And then where it started blowing up was when I saw there was an article on Pro Football Talk where a legislator from Maryland, Emmett C. Burns Jr., he had written a letter to the Ravens asking them to silence one of their players, Brendan Iamalejo, another UCLA graduate. And Brendan had been fighting for equality, same-sex rights stuff for way longer than I was. Like he's like kind of the OG. Like he'd been speaking about this stuff for years. And like essentially this delegate Burns, state senator, he told the Ravens, hey, you need to shut this guy up. Like he shouldn't be talking about this. Like shut up and play football. And like he wrote it on shut up and dribble. He wrote it on official state stationery. And so like I saw this and I'm just like, okay, I got two problems with this. First off, why do you care? Like why do you care as a state legislator that this in his free time he is speaking about this? Second off, that's a First Amendment violation. Like you cannot use your power as a government official to silence someone's freedom of speech. And so I wrote kind of a open letter to him that Deadspin published titled "They Won't Magically Turn You into a Lustful Cock Monster," which contains a lot of swearing and is probably one of the funniest things I've ever written.
That's terrific.
Yeah, and so I sent it to the people I knew at Deadspin. I'm like, hey, would you guys be interested in publishing this? And they're the ones who came up with the title, by the way. Like, I didn't even have a title for it, and they saw that line in there. They're like, this is the title, and they're like, yes, we're gonna post it as is. And so the next, and I figured, okay, yeah, this will probably get maybe 100,000 views or so. Like, you know, I intended it for it to be funny. Like, you know, people get a kick. And then the next day rolls around and they post it. And all of a sudden, that's when I silenced my Twitter notifications because all of a sudden my phone just started blowing up and like it went mega viral. And I was just like, okay. And so then from that point, it was like, okay, now there's national media attention, right? Like now the issue is being talked about, not just in like small local papers. Like now it's like, okay, CBS wants to talk to you. ESPN wants to talk to you. CNN wants to talk to you. And so for me, I was like, great, like this will allow me to talk about this issue and talk about why discriminating against LGBTQ people is wrong, because it is wrong. Like people deserve the freedom to live their own lives. My head coach at the time did not like that because he was so the letter came out on Friday. He pulled me into the front office on Saturday and said, "Hey, like I need you to like not talk about this. Like this, this is too much." Like, and I'm just like, okay, let's kind of get back to this because we're getting ready for a game. Like it's a really brief meeting, right? Like just like 5 minutes or so. And I'll never forget. It was funny because a lot of guys on the team had seen what was happening. And as I got kind of the, hey, the head coach wants to see you, Chad Greenway, our linebacker at the time, is like, ooh, getting called to the principal's office. And so, yeah, sure enough, I get kind of like the, hey, don't talk about this. I'm like, all right, we'll see what happens. And then Sunday rolls around. So next day we play the game. It's our opener against the Jaguars. And the owner, Ziggy Wilf, he's on the field before the game. He comes up to me. He's like, Chris, I just want to say, I thought that was a beautiful letter. Like, I really liked it. That was a great job. And so in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm getting conflicting messages here.
Right. Yeah.
Because the owner's saying this is okay. And the head coach is saying, I need you to be quiet. And so on Monday, I went back in and talked to Coach Frazier again. I'm like, and I told him that. I'm like, look, like Mr. Wilf came up and told me like, he liked what it was. And so Coach Frazier was just like, well, all right, fine then let's figure out how to manage it. And so they the team wanted to use their publicist to, kind of like narrow down the amount of people I was talking to. But for me, it was like I felt and maybe they weren't being malicious about it, but from everything I knew about the NFL up to that point, I was just like, they're probably going to try to make it only be like 1 or 2 appearances and then make it go away. And I was like, I'm doing okay handling myself. Like, I know how this game works. Like, I'll be okay doing this on my own. And so, I basically told him like, I'm going to handle it. Like, and it really wasn't that hard. It's just like, hey, someone wants to talk to you. All right, I'll be there at this time.
I assume the press would request to speak to you, and the team and the team said okay, or the team was like, we're not going to put him out there.
Yeah, well, no, they said okay, like because they ended up, I think it was because I had that conversation with Coach Frazier, and so but the thing is like it basically died out after like a week or two. I mean, because it was like, there was interest in like the daily media scrum, in the locker room, but like I've always been very approachable during that. And it's like, there's only so many ways you can tell the same story. And so like, that's, once everyone gets their sound bites, like usually, it goes away. And sure enough, like it was, I was on national media for, I think it was like about 2 weeks, ended up going on some actual shows, which was pretty fun. I got to go on the Colbert Report, which was pretty cool.
That's cool.
That was a lot of fun. But and then we ended up defeating the amendment in Minnesota. They defeated the same amendment in Maryland, and it was actually like kind of a banner year for LGBTQ rights because those two were defeated, and then 2 measures legalizing same-sex marriage passed. I believe that was in like Washington, and I forget the 4th place. But it was kind of like this turning of a corner where all of a sudden, because this like specific amendment, it had passed in like 30 previous states. Like it was full on its way to becoming like the de facto law of the land, was that same-sex marriage would have been outlawed. And then I think it was like 6 or 7 months later, the federal government passed protection
John
for
Roberts. So it's interesting that issue, since let's call it 2012, 2013, it used to be kind of a, 50-50 issue in this country, same-sex marriage. And now it's 80-20 more, 85, it's 90-10 even in some polls that you read. And it's just in 10 years, the way that the country has moved on that specific issue is kind of, I'm surprised by that. Honestly, I didn't think that would happen so much.
Well, it's wild. So I graduated with a history and political science degree. So like I've studied like poli-sci stuff, and the rate of change for a civil rights movement like is unheard of. Like it is ridiculous how quick it's gone. I mean, and it's good because like it's it's an issue that needs to be addressed. And the problem is now is that the same people who were trying to stop same-sex marriage have now turned their focus to trans rights, and so they're using the exact same playbook. Like every single bit of it is exactly the same. And it's like, can we just forego all the making people's lives miserable and just get to the end point where we say trans people are people and they deserve the same rights as everyone else?
The people who are against progress for no real reason. I mean, I don't know how history looks back on you people, honestly. I mean, people are people. As long as they're not hurting you, I don't understand the gripe, I mean, if somebody...
It doesn't matter your race, doesn't matter your religion, doesn't matter your sexual orientation. As long as you aren't hurting other people, you be who you are.
Right. Now, if you're telling me that my 3-year-old decides my 3-year-old son used to wear dresses, and if my wife had said to me, you know what, I think he's a girl, that's a different discussion. But generally, 99.99999% of the time, what we're talking about is somebody who's really struggling with their identity, who's old enough to understand that they feel differently and would like some answers and would like to not feel bad and be I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
Right.
And,
it's like, I mean, like America, right? Like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Like you should be allowed to pursue your happiness if it's not hurting other people. And if you are born in the wrong type of body, then yes, that's something that should be addressed. Like you should be able to address that without being made to feel bad about yourself. But,
and it's not that big of a deal, honestly. Yeah, it's a really big deal for the person, but it's not a big deal for you and I who are going through our lives. And I just would hope that person could be happy. That's kind of like a sensible way to think about it from my perspective.
Right. Well, and the thing you see all the time is the boogeyman they like to use is like, oh, well, what if a trans person comes in the restroom, and assaults someone? It's just like, trans person going into the restroom wants to go to the bathroom.
I would say they're probably more afraid of you than you are.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't want you to judge them for whatever, and
let's handle our business and get out of the bathroom because it smells like crap.
Right, exactly. Go on our way. All right. Well, Chris, we've taken a lot of your time. You're an interesting guy, and my last question that I had for you about okay, so when you came out with that stance, you said it blew over in 2 weeks. You don't think it affected your career going forward or anything like that?
Okay, yeah. Let me finish the rest of the story.
That's what I wanted to get to.
So in terms of media attention, like the initial kerfuffle kind of went away after a couple weeks, but it definitely changed my relationship with my special teams coach at the time. Mike Prefer, he was not happy about my stance and took it very personal. And whereas before I would say kind of our, we had a typical special teams coach player relationship where, it's, you're there to do a job, joke around with each other. It's football environment. After the letter came out, he started making homophobic comments, became slightly nastier, in terms of interactions. I was just oh, this sucks. Hopefully I can just get through this year and everything will be fine. We'll just kind of put it behind us. And that was not to be the case because the Vikings drafted a punter in the 5th round. And usually when a team drafts a punter in the 5th round, that's their guy.
Right.
And so I was okay, I definitely lost my job. And I am 100% sure it's because I spoke out on this issue because at the time, I was the record holder for pretty much every category of punting records that the Vikings kept. And my numbers had been the same as they'd been previous years. So I'm just there's only one thing that changed here. I'm a big believer in science and trying to, narrow down variables and, you test your hypothesis. And it's okay, well, if all this other stuff was the same and this one thing changed, probably might be the case. So ended up getting cut from the Vikings. I was with the Raiders during the preseason of the next year. Got beat out by Marquette King, which I was totally fine with. He had a hell of a preseason, and the Raiders' choice was essentially go with the sort of unproven rookie and save some money, or go with the veteran who'll be a bit more expensive. And I can't complain that they went with Marquette because that's literally the same position that I got in the league for. There was nothing wrong with that. The point where I knew I wasn't going to play in the league anymore was when I had a couple tryouts during the year. One was a Call of the Wild with the Bears. Essentially, a Call of the Wild is when your punter or kicker like has a bad game and they kind of want to motivate them, so they'll bring in 5 or 6 guys, but there's no intention of signing any of them. It's more just like, what bodies can we grab to light a fire under them. So yeah, that one I knew wasn't going to happen. Had one in Buffalo. They ended up going with Brian Moorman, which he'd punted there for a very long time, so I wasn't surprised by that. But then it was late in the year, it was in December, I think. The Bengals were playing on Sunday Night Football, and Kevin Huber had his jaw broken on a blindside hit. He was the punter for the Bengals. And so I was like, okay, like I'm probably going to get a call tomorrow morning. It was funny, actually, because I was with some friends eating dinner because I was in Minneapolis. I'd been nominated to the all 25-year Metrodome team, right? So they're still celebrating like the best punter of the last 25 years for the Vikings.
Yeah. And you're not in the league. Yeah.
Right, yeah, and I'm not in the league. So I'm having dinner with friends, the game's on a TV, and I see the hit. I'm like, holy crap, like I'm probably going to get a phone call tomorrow morning. Sure enough, 8 o'clock next morning, Chris, can you be in Cincinnati? Like how quickly can we get you here? I'm like, you can fly me out of Minneapolis. I just need some shoes because I didn't bring my cleats with me because not expecting that to happen. So yeah, sure enough, get to Cincinnati, had a tryout there. And that was a tryout where it was me and I think it's like 4 other guys. And I definitely felt like I had won that tryout. Like I was doing exactly what they were looking for. They wanted someone who could directionally punt and put decent hang time on the ball. And they were in the midst of making a playoff run. So I figured, okay, as the veteran guy there, like played in the playoffs before, it's nothing new.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And also like I knew Huber was going to be back next year. Like it wasn't like they were going to move on from him. They just need someone to fill in for the rest of the season. And so I was like, this is literally the most optimal situation I could ever find myself in. And, realized I wasn't getting the job when their ops guy came up to me and said, so you're flying into LAX, right? I'm like, no, please send me to John Wayne. It's closer to my house. So yeah, sure enough, they went with a guy, I forget his name, but he had shanked a couple during the tryout. Ended up cutting him 2 weeks later and then picked up Zoltan Mesko, I think, who had punted for the Patriots, but hadn't been at the tryout. And it was and I was just like, okay, well, they saw that I can do everything they needed to, and they just brought in a completely different guy anyways. So yeah, at that point, okay, I know I'm probably not going to punt in the league anymore.
And did you attribute that to your comments about
about LBGT rights? Yeah. And so that's when I wrote a second Deadspin article. And that one was titled, I was fired by 2 cowards and a bigot. That one I came up with the title by my own. and so that and essentially what I wanted to do was like, I knew I wasn't going to play in the league anymore. And I was like, all right, if I'm not going to play in the league anymore, like I want people to know what happened because, it's too easy in the NFL for them to say, oh, he couldn't play anymore. Right. Like it was like, he just didn't have it anymore. I was like, okay, yeah, maybe that's the case, but based on everything that happened to me, I don't think that's the case. And so when I wrote it, I tried to be as factually neutral as it's possible to be, right? As a person who's, involved in it. And so, I tried to lay out the facts like, hey, here's what happened. Here's the timeline of events that occurred. The conclusion I drew was this is what resulted in me not playing in the league anymore. And so, feel free to draw your own conclusion, but like, here's why I believe this. And that one went pretty viral as well. Didn't go quite as viral as the first one, but I mean, it was definitely like people saw it and they're like, okay, yeah, like that's, this is something we want to pay attention to. So, ended up, filing a lawsuit against the Vikings for wrongful termination. They settled out of court, had to donate a bunch of money to, local LGBTQ charities. Because one of the things with the lawsuit is like, I was like, I don't want any of the money for me. Like, I just want them to understand what they did was wrong. Like, don't do this crap to people. And so, yeah, it's eventually ended up, helping a lot of people in the area. I think Trevor's Project was one of the charities. And then, Mike Prefer had to take sensitivity training to.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah. So now I have heard from someone who said they were close to him. Now, bear in mind, this is like online, so who knows if it's true or not. But they said like they know him and that he actually has turned a corner. Like he has turned over a new leaf. And I'm like if he has, I mean, I will say I wish him more power in doing so, because like at the end of the day, everyone makes mistakes, right? The question is, do you learn from your mistake? Do you try to become a better person? And like, if you become a better person, then like, yeah, it kind of sucks the stuff happened in the past, but moving forward, now you are a better person and, now everyone's life will be better. So if he has turned that corner, then I think that's wonderful.
Well, that's a really good attitude. Most people would carry that around and not forgive. But I think, you sued them and made them donate money to LGBTQ causes. I mean, that's very selfless. And yeah, it's interesting. The NFL is such a big business, and we watch it. I talk about it on a podcast. I spend hours, watching and gambling, and it's great. And there are things that happen that really make you uncomfortable, from, Tua getting concussed twice, obviously during a game this year, to what happened with you, what happened with Kaepernick, what happened with even a guy like Ricky Williams, who was just kind of ahead of his time with the weed, and there are casualties along the way, and nothing's perfect, and you hope people learn and get better. And, I'm still watching the NFL, and it's, Roger Goodell. Roger Goodell is makes me, as a human being, makes me squirm, because I believe in my heart that he's a bad guy, and he's the, and he's the guy who makes all the decisions. So it's
so the greatest trick the NFL ever pulled was making you think Roger Goodell is responsible, because the owners are responsible. That's true. Roger Goodell does nothing that the owners don't.
He does the bidding of the owners. Yes, he does the bidding of the owners.
And that's exactly why he has that job, is so that people get upset with him, and they don't get upset, with the 32 people who can actually make those changes. Because I can promise you, if the owners said, "Hey, we're going to make this change," it would happen instantly, because they're the ones who sign the paychecks. It's really easy to make those changes if you're like, I'm not going to pay you anymore if you keep acting that way.
Right. And you're so right about that. And, like Robert Kraft, okay, obviously he got in trouble for whatever he did with the massage parlor. But aside from that, he's a guy who, little Robin Hood, never killed anybody. But no, he's a guy that I really look up to, as far as he donates to a lot of Israeli causes, Jewish causes. That's important to me. But yeah, I mean, these people are, when you look across ownership, like in the NBA, it's a different group of people, and the players have a lot more. Just contractually, they have a lot more power. They're guaranteed contracts, and they're around, and the product
is a lot more leverage for sure.
Yeah, a lot more. And so, the leagues are different, and it's interesting. Sport is interesting.
Sorry to keep going on.
Keep going.
One of the things I find most interesting about the NFL is that it's this really weird marriage between hyper America capitalism and full on gay communism. Right? Because the NFL is the only major American sports league that actually has revenue sharing. Legit, every team starts with the same amount of money. That's what you have. It's full on communism. But what you do with that money, how you use it, is okay, now that's where it starts getting cutthroat, right? That's where it's okay, how can we leverage this into doing the stuff that we want to do? And it, in my mind, it's one of the things that makes the NFL so compelling, to fans, is that there is always that opportunity every year that this year might be the year your team gets it. Because they're all starting from the same place, right? My wife, she really likes watching the Premier League. She got really big into it. And the problem with the Premier League is you have teams that have money, and then you have teams that don't. And the teams that have money are going to win every time. Very similar to the MLB, right? It's the same 4 teams in the postseason every time, because they have all the money. And it's people still watch because, they grew up on baseball, but it's not that same feeling of okay, this year could be the year, right? This, we have a chance, and legit believe it, right? Because that keeps people coming back. And so I will say, from a business standpoint, the NFL has this perfect sort of synergy going on, to where people will come back every year, no matter unless it gets too problematic, which I think essentially the NFL is never going to be a beacon of social justice, but they will shift enough, if people get angry enough. But I think there was an inflection point about 3 years ago where it became untenable for some people, and they made some concessions, and they stood, and that's when you saw player safety. It was when the Will Smith movie came out with the CTE, and it was just too much.
But I think they fully rebounded from that. Like,
yeah, well, I think Kaepernick also played a big role in that.
Yeah,
yeah, like you see, like, okay, yeah, this guy, you know, he's taking a stand for a social issue, like, and he's clearly not being allowed to play because the position of NFL quarterback is one of the hardest positions to play. Like, it is ridiculously hard to be an NFL quarterback, and like the years that he was like immediately out, you look at some of the quarterbacks on those teams, and you're like,
it's a joke.
Like, it's a joke. How are you starting when Colin Kaepernick is available to be the quarterback for your team?
He was definitely one of. I mean, he brought the Niners to a Super Bowl. He was definitely one of the top 30 quarterbacks on the planet. Yeah. And I don't think he's the best quarterback by any stretch as a 49er fan. But there are, you know, we could talk about like 10 great quarterbacks, and the rest are kind of like, you know,
right? Like, can you do the job? He can do the job.
Yeah. Now I wonder, all these years later, when he has the fake tryout and he refuses to go, blah blah blah. I wonder what that's about. But certainly, right, the first year he became blackballed from the league, like that was a joke. I mean, there's no other way around it. And I don't even like him as a player. But the idea that he's not one of the best 30 quarterbacks in the league, right? I mean, it's on the planet. He's one of the best 30 quarterbacks on the planet, easily. So I don't know. Yeah. All right, Chris. Anything else we need to discuss? I mean, I think we did a lot of good work here.
Covered good ground. I mean, I can go for another hour, but I should probably pick my kids up from school at some point.
I really appreciate it. And, I hope we can talk again. What we do is we do like quick hitting segments on Fridays, and then we release long form episodes on Tuesday with interesting people. Sometimes we have discussions on a specific topic, or we just have discussions with interesting people about things that I find interesting. Maybe people find it interesting. I don't know, but we'll run this in its entirety on a Tuesday, and hopefully we'll get some good feedback.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You too, man. Thanks. Be well.